These patterns all have so much purling in them. I hate purling. It's so awkward and slow. And why did designers have to... What? I can just... What? Seriously? Holy. Hang on a sec. Can I buy you a martini? Hello, friend, and welcome back. Way back earlier this year, we talked all about the knit stitch. You know, the one that every beginner starts with, the one that looks all neat and tidy and pretty. But then your teacher drops the bombshell. Hey, guess what? Now you get to purl. And suddenly it's like you're starting all over again and everything feels clunky, slow, and just plain weird. Here's one thing that nobody tells beginners. There isn't just one way to purl. There are lots of ways, each with their own quirks. The way that you learn to purl initially may strongly affect how you feel about purling. And if your knitting is wonky from one row to the next, it's probably not your fault. It might be the way you've been taught to purl. Today I'm going to show you 5 different methods, including the one I prefer. We're going to talk about the problem of rowing out, and I'm going to talk about Sally Melville's book, The Knitting Experience Book 2, The Purl Stitch, which is the follow-up to the book I showed you last time, The Knitting Experience Book 1, The Knit Stitch. If you are new or even an intermediate knitter, these 2 books could be huge game changers for you. I cannot tell you how much I learned from these books, even as a relatively experienced knitter by the time I got them. Okay, now a little confession here, because I had actually put these methods in a different order initially, and I was going to show you my preferred method last because, of course, I think it's best. But after practicing a couple of these, there's one that I had not actually tried before. I knew about it, I hadn't tried it, and now I'm kind of feeling like it might become my go-to knitting method. So we're going to look at that one last so that we can compare it to all the others that came before it. I'm pretty excited about this. So needles up, let's get to class and spill all the tea about the Purl Stitch. All right, here we are ready to get on with the show so I can demonstrate these different methods and all their pros and cons. And yeah, I know it's a smidge dark in here today, but that's because I'm set up with my hand cam here so that you can actually see what I'm doing with my hands. And in order for that lighting to work, I have to dim the rest of it a bit. You don't care how the sausage is made. Let's move on. We're going to start today with the basic right hand carry. Then we're going to look at a couple of left hand carry methods, and then my preferred knitting and purling method, followed by an almost no hands carry. I know, how weird is that? And when we get to that no hands carry method, I reserve the right to change my mind about my preferred knitting and purling method. Okay, first up is the right hand throw, also known as English style knitting. The truth about this method is that purling probably isn't an issue for you if you learn to knit and purl this way, because the formation of the purl stitch is very much the same as the knit stitch. Folks who knit this way often scratch their heads when Continental and left-hand carriers complain about having to do a lot of purl stitches. Are you confused yet? Don't worry, it will all become clear by the time we get to the end of this video. Now we're going to switch over to the hand cam and I will show you how the classic right hand carry knit and purls are worked. Here we are tensioned up and ready to do the throwing method. I set this up so that there would be a few stitches left just so you can see the right hand or English throw knit stitch looks like before we switch to the purl. This method is the one most North American knitters start with. You hold the yarn in your right hand and you sort of lasso it around the needle. It works totally well, but I find, and this is maybe just me, although I've seen lots of English knitters do this the same way, you have to let go of that needle to fling your hand around. I'm sure there are knitters who do this method who don't have to let go because they keep all the work closer to the tip of their needles. I'm not that knitter. You'll have to remember that this is not my go-to knitting method. The only reason I know how to do this right-handed knitting is because I forced myself to learn it at one point so that I could do two-handed stranding. So we're going to set up to do a purl stitch. Unlike the knit stitch, for the purl stitch, we're putting the needle into the front of the stitch. So if we were going to knit this first stitch, we'd be putting the needle from the left of that first stitch in and to the back and then wrapping it. To do a purl stitch, to make all the stitches on this side look like all the rest of the stitches on this side, we're going to come in with the yarn in front from right to left with the right hand needle on top. And then we need to throw the yarn and push it through. So right to left with the right hand needle on top, throw the yarn and push it through. Let's just do a few more of those. Throw and push, throw and push, throw and push, throw and push. Okay, you got the idea? Let's do a bit of ribbing so you can see the switch up between the knit and purl stitches. So to do a couple knit stitches, I have to bring the yarn to the back, insert from left to right with the right hand needle in back, and throw. And throw. And then to purl again, I have to bring the needle back to the front and throw with the right hand needle on top from right to left. Throw. Bring the yarn back. Throw for a knit stitch. Throw for a knit stitch. Bring the yarn forward. Throw for a purl. Throw for another purl. And when we flip this over, we can see knits and purls as if we were going to do ribbing. So that's the right hand carry method. The pros are it's pretty straightforward. It is good for beginners because the motion to make the stitches is the same for both hands. The cons of that is there's a lot of movement. It can feel a bit awkward. You have to move the yarn back and forth when knitting and purling in the same row. Now I know, of course you do. Those of you who already know how to knit and purl will say, of course you do, Nicole, except there are some methods where you don't, and you're about to see them. Sally Melville has lots of detailed photographs and info on how to do that method. It's quite simple. It lets you focus on stitch structure, but she also points out it's not the only way. Let's switch over to some left-hand carry variations now, also generally known as continental knitting or picking instead of throwing. Off to the hand cam. This is going to be way more comfortable for me because this is how I knit most of the time. We'll just do a few knit stitches to get started, and then I'll switch to purling so you can see the difference. With continental, you're knitting in the same direction as you always do, from right to left. But this time, instead of throwing the yarn around the needle, we're just kind of scooping the yarn off our left finger. Scoop, 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 scoop. You can see for me this is a lot faster. than throwing, which is not my regular method. Scoop, scoop. I'm going to get right to the end. Okay, and we're going to turn. We're going to keep our yarn in the front for purling. And now we're going to look at a couple of options for continental knitting. First, I'm going to show you the standard option, and this is going to explain why a lot of people hate purling when they left-hand carry. In order to make the stitch, you put the needle in the same as we did with throwing, from right to left with the right needle on top, and we need to bring the yarn over the tip of the needle and back down and hold it down with the forefinger so that we can push it through. So there's a lot of movement there, over and down, over and down, over and down. It's much, much slower because there's so much more movement. Remember, with the knitting, we're just picking it off the back. We're kind of throwing it over that right needle to make that stitch, and we have to hold it down here. If we just wrapped it and let it go, we wouldn't have much tension there. So you can't really do that. Like, you see, if I don't bring my finger down, I don't have enough tension on it to pull it through. Down, over, and down, over, and down, over, and down. I hate purling that way. So I don't. I purl a different way. We're going to look at that in a minute. But first, we're going to go back, and I'm going to show you the Norwegian purl method, which is quite different and may break your brain a little bit if you've never seen it before. Okay, I changed my mind because I forgot that I want to show you how ribbing works in this method as well. So I've knit 2 stitches on this side now. I'm going to purl 2, so the yarn is in the front. The yarn has to move to the back, which is quite easy with a left-hand carry. You see, it just kind of pops itself to the back happily, and we knit 2, and then we can just pop it to the front and purl 2, pop it to the back, knit 2, pop it to the front, and purl 2, and then we'll just knit to the end. Okay, now we're going to turn it over, and we're going to do a Norwegian purl. I first learned how to do this purl way back in about 2007 or 8. And I really gave it a try. And I'll talk a little bit about what happened after I show you how it goes. All right, now we're going to Norwegian purl, which is quite different. The yarn always stays in the back. Now, for true Norwegian knitting, you do not have your finger way out like I did there. The fingers are kept very close to the tip of that left needle. And the way this is going to work is we're going to come under that strand of yarn into our purl stitch as normal, fling that needle around to the back, wrap it, and then bring it back through the hole. And as it drops off, it creates a purl stitch. Yeah, I know. You want to see that again? Under the yarn, into the stitch as usual, snap that right-hand needle around to the back, wrap it, and then push it back through the hole. And the easiest thing to do with a Norwegian purl is to keep the yarn over top of that right-hand needle at all times. So into the stitch, fling it around to the back, wrap it, and then push it through. Into the stitch, fling it around to the back, wrap, and push it through. In, fling, wrap, push, in, fling, wrap, push. And you can see that purl stitches are forming here. For me, they end up being quite loose. I think it takes a fair bit of practice. Also, in Norwegian knitting, you don't tension your yarn like this. You really are just putting it between these two fingers. So the idea is to keep your fingers very close to the needles at all times and to keep the stitches pushed up. See, I've already slid my hand too far away. The interesting thing is it does make purl stitches without having to fling the yarn back and forth. See, I can knit two, and then I can just purl two, and I never had to move the yarn from front to back. That's Norwegian knitting and purling. Now we'll just pop out of the hand cam for a sec so I can tell you what happened to me. When I was practicing Norwegian purling way back in the 2000s, pre-YouTube, not pre-internet, there was internet, but pre-YouTube, right at the advent of Ravelry, you couldn't just go to the internet and look up a knitting tutorial and watch someone else do it. I started practicing it on an alpaca lace shawl. And the lace did not go well. There were a lot of yarn overs and knit two togethers and purl two togethers. And somehow, because of the way the Norwegian stitches are formed, I was putting a lot more yarn into some of the yarn overs than others. So half my yarn overs were big giant holes and half of them were little tight holes. And I could not fix it. After doing one end of the lace section of that shawl, which is up here, I decided that's it, no more Norwegian purling for me, and I went back to my usual Continental purling at that time. I have always carried the yarn in my left hand, which I just started naturally because I am left-handed. And no, I don't reverse all the patterns and knit the opposite direction. That never even occurred to me. I was quite surprised when I found out that there are left-handed knitters who do that. If you are one of them, talk to me in the comments and explain to me why you carry in your left hand, but you don't just knit in the same direction as everybody else. I'm still confused about that. Maybe someday I'll research it some more and be able to do a whole video about it. Okay, before we move on and I show you my preferred purling method, let's just talk a little bit about the two methods we just looked at. With that first Continental method where you're wrapping around and holding it down with your finger, like anything, if you practice enough, you'll get faster at it. However, people do complain that their knit and purl rows don't look the same and they end up rowing out. And we'll talk about rowing out later in this video and why that happens and why it happens particularly with standard Continental knitting. Now with the Norwegian purl method, I honestly don't know if there's a way to make that method work well when you're doing anything other than straight up stockinette fabric where you're knitting a row and purling a row. When I think about all the sweaters and blankets and projects and hats and mitts that folks like Arna and Carlos, who are some famous Norwegian knitters, make, pretty much all of it is stockinette and stockinette color work. I don't see them doing a lot of lace. If you are a Norwegian knitter and you can do lace no problem and you can get all your yarn overs to match, let us know down in the comments, particularly if there's a tutorial that you've watched and you know about. Tell people, because a lot of Continental knitters swear by the Norwegian purl, and I don't want to turn anybody off it. It's just that I had issues with it when I was trying to do more than just stockinette. Okay, let's move on and I will show you my preferred and current standard knitting method, which is combined Continental. Now we're going to look at my current knitting method, which is combined continental. So on the knit side, I am picking stitches exactly the same way I showed you back in the first left-hand carry demonstration with the regular continental knitting. But this time we are going to wrap those purl stitches differently to make it easier and give us better tension. It starts out exactly the same as a standard continental purl wrap. We're going to go in from right to left with the right hand needle on top, but instead of bringing the yarn around the top of the needle, we're just going to flick it and scoop it off our finger. So we're wrapping from the bottom, and we don't even have to bring the yarn all the way around the needle. It just comes around the needle as we pull that stitch through. Boop, boop, just like that. So you can see, compared to doing it this way, we are just doing a quick little plucking method, the same as we do with knitting. The difference is, and this is the tricky part, on the right side of the work, those stitches that I wrapped the opposite direction are now mounted the opposite direction on the needle. So when I come back on the right side row, I can't go into the front of the stitch like I normally would, or I'll end up twisting that stitch. I will end up taking the two legs of the V and twisting them over top of each other. So what I need to do to remount the stitch is go into the back of the stitch and knit it. It's really not a big deal. It's just I'm going into the back. Now I'm coming up to the ones that I knit in the standard continental purl. Those ones I can go into the front, and then you'll see right away the leading leg is in the back, the one that's closest to the tip of the needle. So I have to go into the back of that stitch in order to keep it from twisting. Clear as mud? I won't go into a ton of detail on this because I actually have a whole video on combined continental knitting. You can go and watch that. I will put the link up. I'll put the link in the description box, and you can go and check that out if you're curious. I will also be doing an update to that video soon with lots more information about it because I get asked about it a lot. So we'll just finish this row and then flip over, and one more time I'll show you. We're just bringing the yarn from bottom around, bottom around, bottom around. And yes, with this method, you do have to bring the yarn back and forth to do ribbing, but it's not much of a motion to make that happen. You see, I don't have to work very hard to bring that yarn back and forth. So it's pretty smooth. And this has been my knitting method for many, many, many years now. Probably the last 15 years or so I've been knitting that way. 10 to 15, somewhere in there. So if you like this idea and that purl looks like the one for you, if you're a left-hand carry, then go watch my video on it and learn all about it, or just give it a try and practice. Now we're going to go back to the main camera because I want to talk about the final method, which just might be my new favorite. So I'm pretty stoked about this because, like I said, I hadn't tried this before. I've seen it lots, and I thought, oh, that looks interesting. And I've had people in the comments say to me, it's totally the way to go. You need to switch to that method. And I've always been like, it looks weird and awkward, and why would I do that? Well, okay, mea culpa, because I did it for maybe a half an hour today, and I think it's amazing. So I'm going to give it a go on my next project that I start from scratch. Here's a tip for you. This is very important. Listen to me carefully. Do not change your knitting method mid-project. I don't care. Don't do it. You can either practice your new method on a separate swatch or scarf or whatever, or start a new project with that method, but finish the project you're currently working on with your current method. Your tension will be completely different, at least for quite a while, until that new one sets in. Ask me how I know. Yep, Oscar was there. Did not go well. So here's the big reveal. The method I'm going to talk about now is Portuguese knitting. Portuguese knitting involves not tensioning the yarn really. I mean, kind of, but not really in either hand. At least it's not coming off your finger at all while you're knitting. You're going to flick the yarn onto the needle with your thumb. And I know, I get it. What's the difference? It's different, and it's kind of super fun to just flick it with your thumb. And I was kind of feeling the speed and the ease of it right away with this method. In fact, purling is so easy with Portuguese knitting that lots of people who do Portuguese knitting would rather purl than knit. Let that sink in for a minute. They would rather purl than knit. They purl all their garter stitch rows. They will intentionally knit things inside out so that they can purl every row in the round stockinette. How about that? And yep, I know, I thought, hooey, but I tried it. And I'm going to say, I'm not making any guarantees, but there's a good chance I'm going to keep going with this. So the way Portuguese knitting works is that the yarn tension is going to come from the yarn being connected to you somewhere on your upper body. You can use a pin. You could just use a safety pin or a bulb pin or clip or there are all kinds of special Portuguese knitting pins. Some of them super fancy, look like jewelry, that you can use to tension the yarn. You would attach them to the garment you're wearing. I'm not so keen on that. So another way you can do it is to bring the yarn around your neck and have the pulley tension coming from around your neck. I already know that's not going to work for me because I have this ridiculously sensitive skin. I'm going to talk all about that in an upcoming video where I'm going over yarns that are mohair alternatives for those of us who can't mohair. So this isn't going to work for me either. And then I saw somebody do this and I thought, okay, well, that could work. They tensioned their yarn from a necklace. I went to my jewelry stash and I found this beaded necklace, and I took one of these spiral stitch holders, which you can use as a cable needle or a giant stitch marker. I think it's intended for working cables. And I just popped it on this necklace between a couple of the beads and put it on. And then I can take my yarn and put it into the... Okay, I should have done that before putting it on, right? Because I can't see now. Okay, there. I just need to get it hooked into the open part in the center. And now I've got my yarn, my pulley tension going for the Portuguese method around my neck. And that yarn is going to be going straight from around my neck to the work. Okay? Now you've got this visual in mind. I'm going to switch to the hand cam so you can see what my hands will be doing with this yarn around my neck. Are you excited? I'm excited. Here we are with our work set up to do a Portuguese knit stitch. I'm going to show you that first so you can see how it is different from the purl. It's actually the opposite of the Continental knitting, where the knit stitch is the slightly more awkward stitch than the purl. Now, if we do nothing with this other end, we have no tension on this yarn. So we need to give it some tension, but to do that, all we're going to do is pop it over the ring finger of our left hand or your right hand. You can carry it on either hand. It can be tensioned on either hand. It doesn't matter. All we want to do is just have this lever system going, and we want the yarn flowing quite easily and smoothly between those fingers. So no wrapping it around, completely unnecessary. This is more than enough tension right there as you're holding your work. Now for this one, the knit stitch is the one that's a little bit weird because you could see the yarn is coming from the top. I did the first stitch already. It's a little bit awkward, so I just wanted to show it to you from the second stitch onwards so you can see where that yarn is coming from. It almost looks like a German short row double stitch there, doesn't it? So we're going to go into this stitch like normal and bring that right hand needle to the front as if we were purling it. And then we're going to, with our thumb, flick the yarn over the right needle and pull that stitch off. So we go in as normal, put the needle on top, flick, and pull it off. In, front, flick, off. In, front, flick, in, front, flick, off. Always make sure that the yarn on the right-hand needle is coming off the top and it's not coming from underneath. You want it coming off the top. In, front, flick, off, in. You see what's happening here. I won't keep saying that same thing over and over again 500 times because that is annoying. So we'll just get to the end of this row. And I'm telling you, I just learned this today. I had never tried this before, and I'm already feeling pretty fluid and comfortable with this method. It's pretty amazing. Okay, we're going to turn, keeping the yarn in the front. And now the purl stitch is even easier. All we're doing is going in the way we always purl and flicking the yarn over. So always enter as if to purl, flick, enter as if to purl, flick, 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 flick. You see how smoothly this is going? I'm having some issues with this yarn flowing smoothly through my slightly sweaty hands. Sorry if that's TMI, but that sometimes happens when I am doing hand can demos. So super easy, both knitting and purling. And the only thing you need to practice to get going smoothly is making sure that your tension is staying even. Okay, let's do a bit of ribbing in the Portuguese. I've done one row of ribbing already. I needed to practice a little bit. We're going to go flick and knit, flick and knit. We're going to bring the yarn forward to purl, purl, purl back over top, front to knit, front to knit, bring the yarn forward to purl, but we can do all of it with our thumb. Over top to knit. The hardest part is remembering to put that right needle on top when you're knitting. So the right needle always goes on top for knit and purl stitches. Which has some nice mechanics to it, I think. All right, there we go. So we've done a couple of rows there of 2x2 rib in the Portuguese knitting, and it doesn't look too terribly bad, even though I just started this today. Now, you can see here that in my practicing, in the first half of this swatch, for some reason, I was rowing out quite a bit. And I think that was starting up my purl stitches each time. You can see as I got going, it got better and better over here. I just still got this rowing out. And by rowing out, I mean that these stitches are not rowed out. They're all very nice and even. These stitches, you can see big gaps between the purl bumps. It almost looks like I was doing a pattern on purpose, and I was not. So if I flip it over, you'll see those rows where the stitches are elongated because my tension was not even. So I'm going to need more practice on this, but I'm liking it quite a bit. So stay tuned. We'll go back to the regular camera now and we'll talk a bit more about how to avoid this. We talked about how beginners usually don't get told about the different methods of purling, and that the method that they learn the first time may really seriously affect how much or how little they like to purl. And you could see from those demonstrations, as not brilliant as they were necessarily, I do not claim to be proficient at every single knitting method, why they vary so much and why some of those purls are much easier to make than others. But the other thing that beginners mostly don't get told, and if you did as a beginner, lucky you, is about rowing out. When knitters see rowing out in their knitting, and we just looked at what that looks like, they think it's just because they're not good at knitting. Before I switched to my combined Continental version of Eastern wrapping those purls instead of Western wrapping them, my stockinette often looked like this. I rowed out a lot. Now that I knit and purl with the same amount of yarn going into both rows, my knitting tension is pretty much flawless all the time. I know that's a big statement to make, but it's absolutely true. And I have a feeling that with the Portuguese knitting, once I get that tension under control, that it's going to be the same because the motion is the same and the amount of yarn going into both the knits and purls is the same. So I bet that tension is pretty dang even as well. If you're a Portuguese knitter, you tell me what you think. However, if you don't want to knit with either of those methods and you still want to deal with your rowing out, here are some tips for you. One of the big problems with it is that often your row gauge will not match the pattern's row gauge. Even if you've got stitch gauge, your row gauge may be out, and it might be because of your purling method. So, of course, you can try a different purling method. You can adjust your grip. You can adjust the way you tension the yarn. One method that people use is using a smaller needle for the purl rows. When you're doing ribbing, every time on that second stitch, if you're doing, say you're doing knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, and it's not looking very even, you give that second stitch a little tug before you keep going. Sally's got a complete comprehensive course on the purl stitch in here. The Norwegian Purl is not in here. She does touch on the Portuguese knitting just a titch, but she also shows you how to sew things together, how to pick up stitches, and the patterns that are in here are easy enough for beginners who've just learned the knit and purl, but also super lovely and wearable. Book has been around for quite a while, and yet the projects that are in here do not look dated at all. Sally really knows what she's doing, and she's Canadian. So I want to know, this is where you get to tell me all about your purling experiences. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Which method do you do? Do you want to change? Do you avoid purling altogether? Are you a Portuguese knitter? What tips can you give us? What do you love about it? What doesn't work? Are there limitations? Honestly, I haven't researched it enough to know every single plus and minus about it. And like I said earlier, are you a Norwegian knitter? Do you do the Norwegian Purl Stitch? How have you found it when you've done lace work or work with yarn overs or complex patterns other than just stockinette and color work? I have questions. Here's the link to the knit stitch video. Pop in and take a look at that. Even if you need a refresher, I had quite a few people say it was a great refresher for them. I say goodbye. Oscar says goodbye. And we will see you next time with some more very cool stuff. Needles down. Bye.